To the past. I wasn't entirely satisfied with my delivery of the last three words of this book in the video that I just seconds ago finished recording. But it's a half-hour long one-shot video, and it's good enough, so I'm not going to redo it. Just like a week ago, when I read chapter 7 for almost an hour, and then went back through it and realized I had said chapter 8 at the very beginning. I think I'd had a false start, and I'd said chapter 7 on the false start, and then I re-recorded and said chapter 8. Yeah, that's the nature of the reading videos, as I've mentioned in another video. They're not going to be perfect, because, one, I can't and probably wouldn't edit. I want it to feel more like a live delivery that you can't go back and edit as though I'm reading to someone, which is why even when I screw up, I go back and I say the right thing, but I don't, edit it out. So yes, I'm going to leave it as it is. I'm going to put it up tomorrow morning. In this video, you're watching on, if you're watching, which you're probably not because nobody is, on Wednesday morning. This video is primarily going to be about the movies because I will give thoughts on the book on my blog, because that's what the blog is for. It will be the first time that I've blogged about a book that the time I read it that I'm blogging about was on YouTube, and Candide next, that'll be the second. And eventually, perhaps I will blog about reading the Grimm Fairy Tales book. But it's a new adventure in reading. But this is supposed to be about the movies. And already I'm 2 minutes in, and I haven't really said anything about them. There are a couple of movies, a few movies. Over the weekend I watched 2 of them, arguably the 2 biggest deals, although I didn't know that there's a one with Paul Rudd and Mira Sorvino. Mina Sorvino, I think, perhaps? Let's see. That was one that I hadn't realized existed. Mira Sorvino, I was right the first time. There's Mina Suvari and Mira Sorvino, and I sometimes mix up the names, but the 2 movies that I watched are what I'll call the Robert Redford and Leonardo DiCaprio movies. And I suppose first I should say who was the better Gatsby, and I'm going to say that it was Leonardo DiCaprio. We had a somewhat of a Leo weekend because Saturday we watched, I'm talking about myself and the malevolent supernatural force I live with. Saturday we watched the Gatsby movies, the Leo version first, and then yesterday the first movie that we watched was The Man in the Iron Mask, which is one of my favorite Leo DiCaprio movies. Another period piece. I liked the 74 Redford version more, and most of the characterizations of the characters in the book more than the Baz Luhrmann version, which just they both felt too long. The book is only 200 pages. Both movies were 2.5 hours. But I thought that Leo just seemed more of the enigmatic, magnetic character that Jay Gatsby / James Gatz is, and Robert Redford felt like more a matinee idol movie star in a movie, which might be how Jay Gatsby was considered when the movie was made, or what they were going for. It probably is what they were going for. And I think Mia Farrow, it's her best performance as Daisy, and I love Sam Waterston just in general, but I remember being very excited because I was just getting into Law & Order at the time that I first read this book in, I'm going to say, 11th grade, and so it was exciting to see him young in this movie. And also fun to see Richard Gilmore from Gilmore Girls, Edward Herman, in a very small part, but just amusing to see him play someone other than that character. And also just in general, the 74 version, fewer special effects, if any special effects. Probably there were some, but the the new version just seemed so like we're going to. It doesn't matter if we film in this world, which we can't because the world is the 1920s. It doesn't matter if we film it. We're going to paint it with computers, and that's what the movie felt like. The '74 version just felt like they were there, and the party scenes in particular felt more along the lines of what I imagine the party scenes in the book to be, which is not the over-the-top chaos of the Baz Luhrmann version. And I'm no expert on Baz Luhrmann, but I understand that heightened senses, heightened colors, etc. That's his style. It's his thing. On my Apple Music thing, I'm going alphabetically, and I'm about to listen shortly. I think it's one album before it. I'm going to listen to the cast recording of his production of La Boheme that played on Broadway around the same time that I first read this book. But I think that Baz Luhrmann's just not my style, and that the fact that the places and the things in the '74 version looked more real because they were just helped me feel like the characters were more real. Which is not to say that the performances. I think Tobey Maguire was as well cast as Nick Carraway as Leo DiCaprio was cast as Gatsby, but I think that the unreality surrounding them made it harder for me to see the reality in their characters. I also didn't particularly like the framing device that Tobey Maguire's Nick Carraway was writing all of this, recounting this story in a mental institution which he was committed to for alcoholism. I didn't think it was necessary or that it added anything. Maybe there was some trying to make a point of the whole decade was a drunk and needed to go to rehab. But for me, it seemed like if you're going to make a 2.5-hour movie, it don't add anything. Just take more out of the actual source material. But again, I'm no expert on Baz Luhrmann, and he's just not my style. I'm sure a lot of people appreciate his stuff more. Carey Mulligan seemed fine as Daisy. She didn't have the kind of trapped animal quality that Mia Farrow had. And Isla Fisher, is that yes, Isla Fisher as Myrtle. I mostly have memory of her from what is it, Wedding Crashers, and more comedic stuff, and so it was cool to see her in a period sort of movie, and it felt, but it also at the same time felt like she was the only one dressed up as a Baz Luhrmann character, and which I liked again from her, getting to see her have that kind of role, but it seemed at odds with again the rest of the characters. There's one thing that, and I know it struck me and it annoyed me a little bit, but I realized you can't do it in a movie the way you can in a book, and that's the grand reveal of Gatsby. Like, he's seen kind of in profile a couple of times in the book from a distance. Nick sees him because they live next door to each other, and when Nick first attends a Gatsby party and meets him, he talks to him for a little while before realizing who he is. And in a book, when we can't see him, you can do that. But if you're going to cast a huge movie star like Robert Redford or Leonardo DiCaprio, you can't do that, because if Nick starts talking to someone, either the camera doesn't show that person because you want to hide that it's Gatsby, but you get a sense that it's Gatsby. In the Leonardo DiCaprio version, they kind of do that, where they flash to different bits of his face and a ring that kind of identifies him, and flashing around, dancing around his face, but you know it's him. And you don't just know it's him because you're me and I've read the book. Obviously they're hiding him, or they just show the interaction and, oh, there he is. That's the character that's the actor who is the reason we've come to see the movie. Although for me, At the time, I was much more intrigued by Tobey Maguire because I was really into his Spider-Man movies and still love his Spider-Man movies more than any other Spider-Man movies. But his involvement as a character that I more identified with was the reason that I was seeing the movie. But I of course, knew who Leonardo DiCaprio was. So, but that doesn't mean necessarily that you don't do it that way, because Nick Carraway's surprise at it being Gatsby can still register on the actor's face. You can still have that detail. But let's see if I have any more to say about the movies. That was just a thing that, it's an interesting thing thinking they didn't do it the way it is in the book that I really loved in the book, but can you really do that in a movie? It's that sort of interesting thought experiment. This is the copy that I found, buy one, get one free at a secondhand store. I've been looking for this book to the extent that I've been going anywhere during the pandemic. In the secondhand places where I've been going, it would have been too easy to get it at Barnes & Noble or something, but that's not how I buy books these days, for the most part. I was surprised that a version existed without the iconic giant eyes cover, but at the same time, I'm intrigued by this edition, Contemporary Classics, the Scribner Library, for $1.65, and that was when it was new. I believe that at the time I did buy a second book with it, and therefore I got it for free, or I got it for $1. But still, it's only gone down in value by 65 cents at the least. So let's see. Any other thoughts on the movies? I think I've covered it. It was not originally part of my plan of reading this book to watch the movies, because I wasn't a particular fan of them, just like I wasn't a particular fan of the book. But then they popped up streaming, and I thought I would be remiss not to take this opportunity. The book fresh in my mind, and I did technically watch the movies before I finished them, but I already knew how it ended, and by the time I watched the movies, I had already reached the climax, the big dramatic thing that happens at the end of the book, which I won't say out loud, but if you watch the videos where I read the chapters, I do say it out loud. I liked it better than I liked it in 11th grade. It's still not really I don't think the 20s were my era literature-wise, even though I find the characters of the 20s, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Ernest Hemingway, although maybe it's just their caricatures, Zelda Fitzgerald, more interesting than the books that they read. Supposedly, I think I saw that The Sun Also Rises, which I associate with this book because I also read it, I think, right afterwards or right before in whatever, 11th or 12th grade, and so I associate it closely with this book. I think that's out of copyright next year, like this is out of copyright this year. So I may try to track it down and read it to the internet. As I've mentioned, reading out loud allows me to focus more on the books and understand them more than if I had just read a book like this, which already I didn't do too well reading in grade school. I kind of glaze over, so it forces me to really understand it more, and if anything, The Sun Also Rises needs that for me more than this one did, so I probably try to do that. But I liked it better this time. I understood it more, and maybe I'll pick it up again, I don't know. But I could see this time why it's considered a classic, why people love it, whether or not it's my particular thing. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm going to record yet another video, which I will then put directly on YouTube, because that's the order I do things. And next week I start Candide, but at the end of this week, another fairly short, not as short as last week, but fairly short Fairy Tale Friday story out of the Grimm's book. To the past.